Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Today I'm going to be looking at a brand new locomotive from new manufacturer Planet Industrials. Planet Industrials was founded as recently as 2019 and they specialise in all kinds of industrial railway models. Up until now they have produced a number of locomotive kits which you can see on their website, but as far as I can tell today's locomotive is the first ever ready to run loco that they have manufactured. And if you're interested in today's model you just need to Google light railway stores and that's the shop that you can use to order them. But what is today's locomotive? Well, it is this. It is the Kerr Stuart Victory class locomotive, which was built for World War I, and then following the war, they were sold off to a number of other companies, most of them industrial, hence why this is considered an industrial locomotive. And looking at the packaging, you can kind of tell that this is an industrial loco because of the wasp stripes. So cool packaging design. So, what did this cost? Well, the price for this is £130, which doesn't seem too bad. However, if you pre-ordered this, as I did, you actually got £15 off, making the price of this brand new locomotive just £115. Now, in this day and age, that doesn't sound bad, does it? For a new manufacturer, I would say that's really quite impressive. In fact, on price alone, they've completely beaten the bigger, more established manufacturers, haven't they? As smaller manufacturers often do. So, really interested to see what this is like. An observation is that this box, small as it is incredibly heavy. So either they've got some very heavy packaging inside this box, or they've got a very heavy locomotive inside this box. Let's hope it's the latter. But yes, good feelings about this one. First ever loco from Planet Industrials. Let's get it out, let's see what it's like. So, Planet Industrials, they have gotten off to such a strong start with this. Brand new tooled locomotive, interesting prototype, great price for this day and age. Love the packaging design, great quality packaging as well, nice solid box. It's really difficult not to be excited by this. Cannot wait to see what this loco is like. Let me show the end of the box then. So the one I've got is the Kerr Stuart Victory 060 tank in the lined maroon. I had originally chosen the green livery, but then I emailed light railway stores because I changed my mind. I wanted to try the maroon. They updated my order, so they were very accommodating as well. Anyway, this is PI 001-D. It is DC/DCC ready, and that is all we have. So, on the back of the box, nothing much to see, except there is a quality control approval sticker on the back. I did get an email from Planet Industrials to say that all of these models were undergoing a quality control process, which again is a great sign, isn't it? So let's see if it was all worth it. So what do we have here? We've got some sort of paperwork and our first very clouded look at the locomotive through the front of the packaging there. Let's have a look what we got in this little bit of paperwork. Wow. So is this the locos coming off the production line or something? They're in their War Department livery, aren't they? Anyway, there's a class overview, so a little bit to read there if you want to. About the model, it features a high torque motor, it says, flywheel driven chassis, highly detailed, accurate, etc. Next 18-pin DCC socket, that's important information. Caring for your model, talks about the testing actually. They do want you to run this in at 50 to 75% speed for around an hour. I will do that for 30 minutes in each direction. Fitting a decoder, you have to remove the B screws, so there's only two of those, one at the front, one at the back. You've then got to remove the brake rigging and then gently pull the chassis out of the body, so that's fair enough. Seems relatively standard. Oh, and then we've got a whole load of prototype history here, so if you want to read that, you can do. And then on the back, this is some more interesting information. So we've got a bit of specific history about the actual members of the class. Are all 10 there? 6, 7, yeah, all 10 are there, that's cool. We've got a line drawing here, that looks old, yeah. Love that, that's a nice thing to have. A bit about the detailing and a bit about Planet Industrials. So it's just a single sheet of A4, but it seems to cover a lot, doesn't it? Okay, come on then, let's pull this out. This looks a little different from what I'm used to. Looks as though all the foam and such is inside the vacuum-formed sleeve. Anyway, let's undo said sleeve and have a look at our accessories. I can see something I like already. £115, folks. And we've got some proper etched builder's plates, I'm going to say. They're not fantastic. I mean, they're illegible. You can't actually read what's on them. So I don't know if I'd bother fitting them, frankly, but at least they're etched. I suppose that's quite good. You've got these little boxes. Are these sand boxes or something? I remember producing some of these for my Manning Wardle tank engine, but these are lined and painted. And we've got a few other bits and bobs as well. Looks like little toolboxes. So nothing in the way of sort of buffer beam detail, the stuff that you'd expect not to be fitted in case it clashes with any of the running mechanism or anything. But still, if you want to customise a little bit, then these parts will allow you to do that. So I suppose it begs the question, what is actually fitted to the loco? Well, I've not seen it properly yet. It's got lots of foam around it, which is good. So yeah, like I say, quality packaging. Let's open it up. Let's take our first look at Victory in the lined maroon. I'll tell you what, it's a large loco. This is not some little engine as you might expect for £115. Wow, look at that. That is quite a beauty, isn't it? Yeah, a fairly matte finish, it looks like. Yeah, not particularly glossy. I'll tell you more about what I think of that later on, but for now, let's try and get it out. I think I'm going to grab it with the tanks. Oh, yeah, you know, this is a heavy loco. Yeah, this loco's got some decent weight to it. And yeah, feeling it, there's a good reason for that. That is that the running plate is die-cast, made of metal, and also the boiler, yeah, that's made of metal, and it feels as though the smoke box at the front there is metal too. So loads and loads of metal on board this. That is just awesome to see. And, you know, in some ways it's a relatively basic loco, isn't it? I think the livery is very basic, not too much in the way of lining or boiler banding. So presumably the cost of actually decorating these models is going to be less than, let's say, a highly detailed lined pre-grouping loco or something. But still, that's reflected in the price, so that is absolutely fine. Yeah, it looks lovely. It really does look nice. We're going to have a much closer look at the detail on this loco in just a sec. But first of all, let's talk a little bit more about the prototype. The Kerr Stuart Victory class was a fleet of 10 060 tank engines built in 17 for the Railway Operating Department, or the ROD. This was a division of the Royal Engineers formed in 1915 to operate the various railways associated with the First World War. Obviously, though, the war ended the year after these locomotives were built, and therefore the ROD sold the engines to a number of other operators. 3 of them went to the Great Western Railway originally, and others went to the Alexandra Docks, the East Kent Light Railway, and a handful of other railways and private industrial businesses. And the vast majority of these locos ended up being owned by the National Coal Board for the latter part of their lives. The locomotives themselves featured outside cylinders, and they produced a tractive effort in the region of 113 kilonewtons. Sadly, all examples were eventually scrapped along the way, with the final example being cut up in 1969. Not nice. So there it is, Planet Industrial's first ready-to-run locomotive up close and personal for you. And actually, I quite like this. It's pretty decent, in my opinion. For the price I paid, I think it is absolutely fine. £115 as a pre-order price, absolutely spot on the money, I think. I do think the buy it now price of £130 is perhaps a little bit steep for this now, but not criminally so, and we certainly see far worse value for money than this all the time in this hobby. I say this because the level of detail is relatively basic in areas, and the quality is not the greatest. There's nothing horribly wrong with the quality, but there are 1 or 2 issues that I noticed quite quickly under closer inspection. Thanks to all of the die-cast on board though, the weight is very good indeed. This weighs in at 241 grams, which is actually more than a Bachmann 812, and that's including its tender, by the way, and also more than the Oxford J27, which again was, I think, a larger loco with a tender. So the weight is absolutely awesome. The issues with the quality though are as follows. The finish is not fantastic. It's not completely matte, but it's not quite the quality satin that we see from the likes of, let's say, Bachmann or Dapol. The precision of the decoration is relatively low though. On the boiler you can see we've got quite a bit of paint splattered on here. and the join between the smoke box and the boiler is very messy indeed. You can see in a couple of places we've got black paint bleeding and smudging onto the boiler. And the reason for this is that the smoke box appears to be the same part as the boiler. Most manufacturers will have the smoke box as a separate part so that they can be painted separately. Here though, Planet Industrials have had them as the same part, which will simplify the manufacturing and assembly process, but it complicates the decoration process, and the evidence is here in the messy paintwork. The fit of some of the components is a little bit questionable as well. You can see the front safety valve here has not been fitted correctly, and it has been glued into that position, which is unfortunate. The whistle on top is loose, I noticed, because I had to straighten it when I got this out for the first time. It seems okay now, but yeah, it is a little bit loose. And we've got a bit of visible glue on some of the components, and quite a bit of visible glue in a couple of places on the tanks, which is less than impressive. So yes, this is the first locomotive from a new manufacturer, and a lot of this stuff is not too bad, but at the same time this is not a Bachmann locomotive. This does not have the same level of quality as a Bachmann loco, and therefore it actually makes sense that this is quite a bit cheaper than that sort of loco. I also said that the level of detail is a little bit basic, and I think that is true. The lining, for instance, is quite sparse. We've just got it on the side of the tanks and the side of the cab here. That's absolutely fine. It may be prototypical, but yeah, it is quite simple. The front buffer beam is relatively sparse. It does appear to be accurate that there are no vacuum pipes or anything like that, but we also have no option to fit chains to the coupling hook, which would be a feature on the real thing, obviously. The buffers, though, are made of metal, and they are also sprung. There you go, nice sprung buffers, not bad at all. We've also got some separately fitted metal handrails, quite a few separately fitted lamp brackets, one or two of them not 100% straight, which is unfortunate, but they are separately fitted. The front of the smoke box door is detailed with a lamp bracket. It's got the wire handrail and the smoke box dart, which is again wonky. I don't know if I can maybe straighten it. No, again, that seems to be stuck in that position. Yeah, and I don't want to break it off. The top of the chimney also appears to be a separately fitted metal part, but unfortunately it's not a good fit. The join there is very, very noticeable. There is no detail behind the frames. As you can see, that's just a flat area, reasonably visible. Would have been nice to see some valve gear down there, even though we do have the cylinders, the crossheads and the connecting rods on the outside of the loco, and all of those do seem to be made of metal, good quality and nicely painted. The water filler caps appear to be separately fitted, and the little handles on top of them I think are separately fitted, which is quite impressive. The top of the cab though just has a moulded vent. You can't open that up. On most modern high-spec locos you would expect to see that as a separately fitted part, but here, presumably to simplify manufacturing, they haven't done that, but I think that's okay because it is reflected in the price. The front of the cab has glazed windows, which as you can see are very nicely fitted. The rear windows have separately fitted bars on them, which is quite a high quality touch actually. This is not a moulding effect. Each of those pieces appears to have been separately fitted, which is awesome. And the cab interior is pretty good. There is a fair amount of separately painted detail here and a good number of separately fitted parts as well. The gauges haven't been picked out, I don't think, but they are quite difficult to see. All in all, I think this is a really good cab. Confusingly though, there is no coal included, so presumably Planet Industrials are expecting you to provide your own, but it would have been nice to see a removable coal load in there. As a so-called ready-to-run locomotive, I think it ought to be complete out of the box. Around the back, you've got more separately fitted lamp brackets, more sprung buffers, and we do have a NEM coupling tension lock pre-fitted to the front and the back, which have a little bit of pivoting on them, not a huge amount, but I think that's definitely adequate. In terms of the chassis, we've got some detailing underneath the cab, including the steps, which are part of the casting, I believe. The front steps are missing and supplied in the detail bag, and if you were to fit those, they would hide the slightly messy looking rear of the buffers there. The wheels themselves, though, are really nicely done. You can see the axles have been covered, and you've got the little lathe holes in the front there. And like I say, the coupling rods are all nice and fine. I think they are cast, and as I said earlier on, those are nicely painted. So overall, it's a pretty good looking model. I think the level of detail and the quality could definitely have been improved, and I think the next locomotive from Planet Industrials, should there be one, will be very telling as to whether they are learning from their first loco and making improvements. But yeah, overall, quite a nice little loco, not overly expensive, which makes it a little bit easier to forgive some of its shortcomings, although do bear in mind you can get more detailed and higher quality from other manufacturers, but you might have to pay a bit more for them. Right, let's move on, let's get this onto the track, let's see how it works, and let's take a look at its mechanism. So there is Victory down onto the track, and the first performance test has already been filmed and it's in the can, and I will show you that in just a second. Next up, I went on to look at the mechanism. Now, I think it's fair to say that I haven't been very impressed with this model so far. However, I'm pleased to say that in terms of mechanism, Planet Industrials have gotten this absolutely right. And mechanism is definitely an area where this loco is strong. So, first of all, the base keeper plate can be removed by getting the brake rigging out of the way and removing the 4 screws. This reveals the axles. Now, there is a lot to unpack here. It is quite a complex design, I would say, and in some ways it seems quite inefficient in the way that it's manufactured. Let me explain. So, axle 1, we have small bearings and the driving gear. This is a single geared loco, it's just these front wheels that are driven. Axle 2 has medium bearings, so different size bearings, and a slight bit of springing to it. Okay, fair enough. Axle 3 has massive bearings, so that's the third different type of bearing, which basically completely restricts the movement of the axle, which might be intentional for all I know, but it does do that. So we've got 3 different types of bearing on this loco, which means that every single axle has to be assembled differently. And obviously this increases the complexity of the production and therefore the production cost. Most locos don't do this, but hey, bearings, that is a good feature. The pickups are hardwired, and again, this is a little bit inefficient because the pickups are split into 2 on each side, and they are completely separate with a separate wire. So you've got twice the number of pickup parts and twice the number of soldered joints. So again, that's going to increase the production costs. But it doesn't affect your ability to service the loco because you can still access the pickups by just lifting the wheels up slightly, cleaning them and putting them back down again. Body removal is relatively simple. Once the brake rigging is off, you could probably do this with the brake rigging still in position, but you've just got to avoid it to get your screwdriver in there. And this reveals quite a good looking chassis. It's die cast, so nice and heavy. No lights or anything though. Most modern locos are starting to have lights now. This one doesn't, but that's not to say it's light on features because it's got a 5-pole motor, which is all sealed, but it seems to be good quality. Flywheel on that as well. Small one, but still a flywheel. You've got the decoder socket on the side of the loco, which is quite interesting, but it's easy to access, so nice work. And it does have a pre-fitted speaker, which is quite a nice feature, so bung a sound decoder onto that and you'll get your sound straight away. The gauging is absolutely spot on. It came in at 14.3 to 14.4 millimeters back to back, which is right there at the standard on the nose. So mechanism, absolutely fine. Such a small loco, but it's got all the quality features you can ask for. It is a little bit complex in its design, which will have put the cost up a little bit, but none of that negatively affects the quality, of course. Right, so that's the mechanism. Let's move on and let me show you how that first performance test went. Okay then, let's find out whether this works. The camera is rolling, ready for its first ever test. So, forwards direction. Let's give it some juice and see. Here we go. Ooh, yeah, started off nicely. And I've got to say, it's running very, very slowly. Look at that, that's 50% speed. It's incredibly noisy. Let me get close so you can hear it. Here we go. Yeah, very, very noisy. Sounds like there's a lot of machinery moving around. Looking at the underside, it does seem as though only one axle is driven. You guys will know whether that's the case or not. But yeah, it sounds noisy. So does it have a massive gear train or something? I don't know, but it's getting louder if anything. Okay, fair enough. What's the torque like then? Let's have a look. Oh, blimey. Yeah, that's quite the sound, isn't it? Much louder in reverse at the moment. Okay. Torque, just interested. Oh yeah. Yeah, there's torque. In fact, it barely slows down at all. Yeah, alright, that's good. Okay, you know what, I just feel like the crawl's going to be good. Looking at the way it started off. Let's have a look. Now bear in mind, it's not been running yet. It's not had any running at all besides what you've just seen. So with that in mind, let's try crawl. I'm easing it up. Oh. So, the gearing is smart. The gearing is really smart because it runs nice and slowly, and therefore the lower speeds are favoured over the higher speeds, and that makes sense. This is an industrial locomotive, it's not an express passenger one. Yeah, the speed and the way that this favours a crawl is just perfectly apt, isn't it? That's really nice and smooth. It's just noisy. Flywheel effect? No, not really. So yeah, maybe there is some source of friction in there because I'm not getting the flywheel effect, but at the end of the day, it's smooth, it's reliable, and it can crawl well, so not too much to complain about. Let's move the camera along and just see how it gets on over the express points. Again, this is quite mean to do at this point because it hasn't warmed up yet. Here we are, it's just entering the dead zone now. Ooh, momentary stop there, but it is going very, very slow. And it did not stop and need assistance there, so that's great. Let's go over it backwards. This is very, very slow. Yeah. I'm impressed. Right, let's see how it gets on around the track. Let's run it in. 30 minutes forwards, followed by 30 minutes in reverse at 50. It does seem to have very fine scale wheels, so it's worth checking that it will stay on the track. Obviously my layout is not of a high standard, so if it stays on my track without derailing, then it should do the same for you. And the second radius was fine. I did not notice it slow down there. And off it goes up to the top of Gordon's Hill. We've had some fine scale wheels derail at the top of Gordon's Hill here, so I'm definitely keeping an eye on it just here. That curve okay. Into the straight there, no problems. Off the grass mat. Seems to be alright, doesn't it? If it gets over those points, we know the wheels are all still on. Yep. The performance is okay. I don't think the noise is a problem, and if you've got a DCC sound version, that's going to drown out the noise, I think, isn't it? Yeah, overall, there's no cause for complaint with the performance. It's smooth, it's reliable, it stays on the track, and the range of speed it produces is very realistic. So that is fantastic. We can now say that this is a great performer, and that is something that a lot of people look for, and I think quite a few people are going to be quite pleased with that. So I'm going to finish running this loco in, and then I'll come back, I'll couple it up to some wagons, I'll do some haulage testing, and we'll finish off this review. Alright, see you in a second. Okay folks, we are back, and running in is complete now with no issues whatsoever. I never saw this derail, never saw it slow down on curves or points. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. It still seems to be quite noisy. Yeah, it's a noisy one. I'm not sure why, because the gear train doesn't seem to be particularly convoluted looking at it, but yep, it is quite noisy, but there are no ill effects, and everything seems to be as it should be, so it's not as though there's anything wrong as far as I can tell, so that's good. The torque and the pulling power is fantastic. As I've already demonstrated, this loco can easily turn its wheels with an obstruction. In fact, it doesn't seem to slow down very much at all when you do that, so that's great. The tractive effort came in at 0.34 newtons, which should allow this loco to haul about 22 coaches on straight and level track. That is a lot more than other 060 tank engines of this size. And in fact, there are much larger tender locos that I have in the collection that are weaker than this. So that is really, really impressive. Let's have another look at that crawl, because it really was a wonder to behold, wasn't it? Particularly given the fact that this has outside cylinders and therefore connecting rods and crossheads to move as well. So extra resistance, but still a superb crawl. Look at that. Now, this loco doesn't put other manufacturers to shame in most areas. The level of detail is a little bit behind what most of them are doing, and so is the quality, but the performance is right up there. This is one of the better performing locos I've seen
in terms of its crawl and reliability and everything, really. And it's a heavy loco as well. You know, when you see this loco moving along, there's a lot of weight on board that it's got to move. Smooth at all speeds. Look at that. Yeah, it's really, really good. The performance is so much better than I was expecting. And that's kind of the saving grace of this loco, because it is a wonderful performer. Right, so for this loco's hauling test, I've set up quite a large train, and I don't think most modelers are going to be asking this much of the little Kerr Stuart Victory, but I'm going to do it because this year we've seen quite a lot of weak locos that aren't great pullers. They're struggling to move their own weight at times. The Hornby 9F is an example that I tested. And I want to see if this loco, small as it is and relatively inexpensive as it is, can do better, and I think it probably will. So let's back up, let's test the couplings, and ultimately let's test the pulling power. Look at that for a smooth start. Go on then, first coupling, let me try and do this nice and steadily, slow it down. I mean, look, you've got some serious control over this. In fact, I went so slow that it was almost not going to do it there, but it has. Are the couplings at the right height? Yeah, I would say perfectly at the right height. And can the loco haul these? Let's just go right up to 50. Yeah, look at that. Accelerated the whole train with no issues. So the theme on the layout today is industrial locos, and there is an odd one out, and whoever identifies the odd one out first, I will pin your comment. On the middle line, this is also an odd one out. Ooh, Victory stopped. It's not done that before, so obviously the extra loaders caused that. Yeah, so this is not an industrial loco, this is the Oxford N7 of course, but it kind of reminds me of Victory because again, this one was quite inexpensive, it had loads of die-cast and metal and weight on it, and it was also a fantastic performer. So yeah, it just reminds me of Victory quite a bit. So there it goes. Rest of the locos though are industrial ones, including this one. This is the Hornby Peckett B2 Classic Industrial Loco. One of the best quality ones as well. Yeah, great runners these. There you go, but not as good as the Kerr Stuart though. Not as good as Victory. Right then, let's see how this performance changes with quite a heavy load. Now this loco is very slow and steady, but that just means that all of the speed from that motor is just being converted into raw torque and power. And that really manifests. I mean, did you see that around that curve? No slowing down whatsoever, and it wouldn't do that if there wasn't a bunch of torque there, and in fact we've seen lots of locos really struggle. Look, it's still going. I'm on exactly the same controller that I tested that Hornby 9F and all those other weaker locos on. Same controller, same setup, no slowing down, no struggling, no wheel slip, no nothing. It's quite wonderful. The performance is really something. And it is a great looking loco, isn't it? The Victory is not something that we've ever seen come to our layouts before. This is the first time that this loco has been available in 00 scale, ready to run. And the fact that it looks decent and runs well is really quite pleasing. And all for £115 as well. I think even at £130 you could certainly do worse than this, couldn't you? And if you're someone who's less interested perhaps in absolute detail and more interested in good running locos that are going to be reliable and that are going to last because they have quality mechanisms, then this is a loco that you ought to pay attention to, because it's quite rare to find a loco that is quite this good in terms of performance, and yet it really is good. Let's have some ratings then for the Planet Industrial's Victory locomotive. And overall, I think this is a great first effort for Planet Industrials, and we should certainly encourage new manufacturers into this hobby, particularly ones who are willing to sell their models at a reasonable price for a change, just to remind us that these things are possible. The level of detail though was quite disappointing in my opinion. Yeah, relatively basic model. It's lacking detail in a number of areas. For instance, there are no chains fitted to the buffer beams and no option to fit them, no coal load included, no lights inside the cab or anything like that. The builder's plates were quite poor quality, can't actually read those. No detail between the frames, no opening vents, no gauges inside the cab. So yeah, a relatively basic model, but at least they didn't try to run before they could walk, like some new manufacturers do. I mean, KR Models, for instance, with the Fell,
complete mess because, in my opinion, they're doing too much before they're an experienced manufacturer. But yeah, the level of detail, it's okay, it's got some nice details to it, that's for sure, but it's relatively basic compared with the other locos I tend to look at. The performance though stacks up against other manufacturers' models extremely well. In fact, I would give this a 5-star. Perfect performance, very, very reliable, nice and smooth, fantastic crawl, no slowing down or derailments. Quite a noisy loco, but that's not a problem as far as I'm concerned. The pulling power is great as well. 0.34 newtons or 22 coaches on straight and level track. For a relatively small 060 tank engine, that is very, very good. It's more than a Bachmann 7F, more than a Dapol Large Prairie, even more than a Hornby Lord Nelson. There are large tender engines that are less powerful than this. That's fantastic. In the same strain, the mechanism has to be 5-star. Bearings on all of the axles, all-wheel pickup, 5-pole motor, flywheel, pre-fitted speaker, reasonably easy access to all of the components for maintenance and servicing, and reasonably easy to DCC fit as well. Cannot fault the mechanism. The quality though is not fantastic. It does have some good quality features, such as the high amount of die cast, which is great, but the finish is reasonably plasticky looking, even on the metal boiler, and the tanks are much more matte even than that. You've got paint bleed on different components, visible glue, etc, etc. Really, more care needs to be put into the manufacturing moving forward. Value for money though, £130 is the price, or £115 for pre-orders. At these sorts of prices, it's not a bargain, I don't think, but for the most part, these prices do reflect the model. It's reasonably inexpensive compared with other offerings on the market, which usually start at £130 and go quite a bit higher these days. But then again, this model is quite a bit simpler than those, and it doesn't have quite as many features as some of those. Yeah, I would say the value for money is about right. I've given it 4-star. Overall then, that is 7.53 out of 10. That score has been massively dragged up by the perfect performance and the high quality mechanism. If those were any less than perfect, then this would be quite a disappointing score, but as it is, it's come out not too bad. Into the logbook we go in 26th place, above the Dapol Class 52 and below the Bachmann 7F. Well folks, thank you so much for tuning in for another review. I really hope you enjoyed this one. It's always really exciting to try a model from a new manufacturer that you've never tried before, and this one really was interesting. Like I say, I think this is a great effort for Planet Industrial's first locomotive, and all things considered, I think I would recommend it to you, provided its shortcomings are not too major for you. And that's pretty good going for a manufacturer's first loco. So well done, Planet Industrials. Thank you for bringing something so cool to the world of model railways, something that we haven't seen before. That's really exciting. And I'm really looking forward to what other industrial locos they might bring to the scene. Small industrial tank engines are very, very popular at the moment, and if Planet Industrials are going to do more of this sort of thing, then I think we've all got cause to be quite excited, haven't we? But for now, that will do for this review. Thank you so much for watching. Comment down below, let me know what you thought of this loco. Will you be trying one now that you've seen the review? Has it put you off due to the quality and detailing issues? Please do comment down below. For now though, thank you for watching once again, and I will see you very, very soon for another review. Alright, cheers folks, take care.